Greetings, nature nerds, and welcome back to Ask an Ecologist. My name is Suzanne Simpson, and I'm an ecologist with Bayou Land Conservancy. And each week, I come to you at 3 p.m. on Thursday and take your questions about everything having to do with the natural world. And this week, we're talking about the natural world, both past and present. Thank you for joining me again. I started these videos at 3 p.m. because that's a really pleasant time to be outside in March, and now it's July. And I'm starting to wish that I had scheduled these for a 10 a.m. film time. So, sorry if I start to glisten a bit as I go through your questions today, but it is, here in Houston, it is reaching the hundreds, which means it feels about 10 degrees hotter than that with the humidity. So it is like a huge bummer outside today at 3 p.m. But we're going to get into it. I'm still glad to be happy, healthy, and outdoors. So we're going to start with a question by John Lane. And he said, "Hey Suzanne, great info on mockingbirds." So last week, if you missed it, we talked about mockingbirds and why they mock the calls of other songbirds. Great info on mockingbirds. It got me thinking about questions about them that probably no one can answer, but here's my thoughts. At the end of the last ice age, there were several large animals that went extinct. I wonder if there were any birds that went extinct with them, and I also wonder if our mockingbirds still mock the songs to those extinct birds. Whenever I hear them singing their songs, I can really recognize just one, the hawk, which I think is totally hilarious, a little bird mocking a hawk. But the other songs of the bird I don't recognize. I'm not a birder, but was just wondering. So John's wondering if mockingbirds can mock the songs of birds that are no longer here, maybe birds that are extinct. Well, the way that the song learning works with mockingbirds is they're not born with a repository of songs that they then sing. They learn songs by the different sounds that are in their environment. And so their songs are actually very, very much rooted in the present. So they can mock a car alarm, they can mock a lawnmower, but they're not going to be mocking something that they might have, co-occurred with years and years ago, because they're learning their environment as they go along. That would be really cool, though, if we could hear the songs of extinct species. The reason you might not be able to hear clearly another bird's song in a mockingbird is because mockingbirds kind of remix all of the songs that they hear. So you'll hear a syllable from one bird, and then quickly it'll change into something else, and it sort of becomes this weird amalgamation of different sounds that the mockingbird hears in its environment. So that's probably a good reason why you're not able to immediately pick out another song whenever a mockingbird is calling. The more you listen to other birds and the more you listen to mockingbirds, the easier it's going to be for you to pick out those syllables in their environment. All right, hope that answers your question. Next one comes from Kelly McElroy O'Hara. She says, "We live near Discovery Green now, and I'm curious about lotus flowers in their ponds. So beautiful, and wondered if they are considered invasive or compatible. And what about koi? They're not in this pond, but I wish they were for aesthetics. But wondering if they are considered invasive and should stay in a personal water garden. Not that I am planning on sneaking some in there or anything." Well, don't worry, Keller. We're not worried about that. Good question. I probably need to see a picture of the lotus flower to be sure if it's native or invasive, but we do have a Texas water lily that occurs in a lot of these ponds that's considered native, and that could very well be what you're seeing, and in which case, yes, that is a native species that would be blooming in the pond. As for koi, I definitely wouldn't recommend releasing them into a pond like that, because koi can form feral and sometimes invasive populations, and so that's something that kind of similar to the Asian carp. That's something you really want to limit. If the pond is suitable to have fish in it, those fish will over time naturally colonize. And I often get the question, like, how does a fish end up in a pond? They don't walk there. But a key distributor in this case is other animals. So other animals will prey upon fish. Birds, for example, will prey upon fish, and they can actually end up dropping the fish out of their beak and into a new body of water, or they're preying upon fish, and the bird might actually get some of their eggs in their talons, and then those drop off. So over time, these events happen and can lead to fish colonizing appropriate areas of water whenever they're permanent. As an aside, this is also why ephemeral or temporary bodies of water are so important to species like amphibians, and why amphibians tend to lay their eggs in ephemeral bodies of water, because as permanent bodies of water get colonized by fish, amphibian eggs are going to be preyed upon more and more. So these ephemeral bodies of water that are there and then they aren't are perfect for amphibian breeding season, because they're not there long enough to get colonized by a large amount of fish. Okay. Next question comes from Bob Simpson, who says, we have a large number of wasps in the mud and grass around our garden. Are wasps attracted to mud and wet grass? Yes. A lot of wasps build their nests out of these different types of materials, so it is not a surprise to see them congregating around that area. Bob Simpson also happens to be my dad, and I know that my mom has a hit list out for all the wasps in her area, so that is one reason why there are so many wasps at my parents' house. Okay, and then another question from John Lane, who is asking something else about Ice Age, is what is your best guess as to why several large mammal species went extinct during the last Ice Age? Never mind what the textbook says, what do you think? So, to be clear, we're talking about a mass extinction event that took place at the end of the Pleistocene, where a number of big megafaunal mammals became extinct. And this is, something that we see in our natural history museums a lot, representations of this Pleistocene Ice Age extinction. And I think that there are probably different causes for this mass extinction in different parts of the world. For example, I think that there's pretty strong evidence to conclude that the mammal mass extinction in Australia and New Zealand was mostly due to extreme hunting pressure. But in other parts of the world, like North America, I think the evidence is a little less clear. Now, to dive a little bit further into your question, generally in ecology, I tend to be a both and thinker. So I find that ecological communities are so complex and so inextricably linked, but linked in a complicated way. It's less of like cogs on a wheel where everything spins each other the same way, and it's more sort of like there are really loose connections in some relationships, but there are other relationships that are very tightly linked. And all that is to say that I tend to gravitate towards multiple factors driving a single event. And that is kind of where I lean on this one. An example of not what I just described would be the Alvarez hypothesis that hypothesized that the asteroid hitting the Earth was the primary and really sole cause of the dinosaur extinction. And I think, if I'm being honest with myself, if I were a scientist back then when the Alvarez hypothesis was proposed, I would probably be pretty skeptical about a single asteroid hitting the Earth resulting in such a huge catastrophic change. But the evidence has borne it out, and it's a great example of stochasticity affecting an ecosystem. In this case, this mass extinction, I think that there are multiple variables at play. So the way that ecosystems work is, if you have an ecosystem at a stable state, it has a certain amount of built-in resilience to disturbance and to other factors that can change that stable state. But over time, I think overhunting, I think a changing climate in parts of North America, and I think other factors like disease all sort of work together to move that stable state into a completely different one, to where even if we had restored the environment to its previous conditions, you wouldn't get the same results before, because the ecosystem now has a different set of feedbacks and different sets of relationship linkages that are affecting how it functions. So to sum that up, I think hunting pressures, I think changing climates in parts of North America, and other factors like disease caused the mammal extinction in our area. And I think different factors in different parts of the world caused that extinction, but it all happened in the same period of time. And so it was a global mass extinction of the megafauna, of a lot of the megafauna on our planet. I hope that answers your question, John. Thanks for asking that one. That was a good one. I hadn't thought about that question in a long time. And so it was good to revisit some of the science that that led to those hypotheses and the different sort of testing. And it's not, even now, I don't think that we have a final answer. It's still something that we want to keep looking into. So yeah, that is everyone's questions for the week. Remember that you can submit a question to Ask an Ecologist by emailing us at info@bayouland.org. You can send us a message on Facebook. You can leave a comment. And I look forward to taking your questions next week. I don't think it will be any cooler here on my patio in mid-July, but I look forward to it. Thank you for hanging out with me, and we'll talk next time.